Let's get another question here on the show, Jim. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com.
How can we miss him if he won't go away?
Well, we'll see if you miss this question. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brad Stutz. Seeing as...
Stutzy!
You know this man.
He's from North Kakalaka.
And you know everyone from North Carolina.
That's right.
Seeing as we just passed the anniversary on October 2nd of the Ring of Honor Midnight Express reunion from 2004, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that event and how it came to be. Was this the first time that the rest of the team had seen Dennis since the 80s? Did everyone meet up at the venue or get together beforehand? Was this when the rest of the team finally learned why Dennis left in 1987, or had that been addressed among you before that? And finally, does Jim recall why the Q&A that was filmed that afternoon before the show was never released by Ring of Honor?
Yes. Because whoever was shooting it fucked up and the audio was unusable. It was unusual also, but it was unusable. Yes. Okay, first of all, that was technically the first full reunion. And I hadn't realized or remembered it was first week of October until he mentioned that. But the actual first reunion was the weekend before in Kingsport, Tennessee. Me and Bobby and Dennis against, I believe, the Rock and Roll Express. As a matter of fact, I know it was. And then Stan wasn't there for that one. And then everybody was in Philly for Ring of Honor. And the way that it came about was that Dennis had been living in Colorado since 1988, I guess, or 87. And he had moved back to Alabama. And in the process, somebody got his phone number and he went to a show in somewhere in Alabama and just to visit guys. And when everybody saw, there's Dennis Condrey. Well, the word got to us, and I think I called, who did I call to see if they had his number? But anyway, we heard Dennis was back around. So, and I'm trying to remember who called who first. It's been almost 20 years, right? But anyway, we talked on the phone. And because not only now that Dennis was back in public, did we want to talk to him and see what had gone on, but also now that Dennis had been seen, Bobby was available. I was in OVW, but I could do whatever the fuck I wanted. Stan, was available because he had quit the business years before and was doing the boat racing thing. So people started calling to see if we wanted to get back together. And Bobby, at the time, I don't know if he was living in the Tri-Cities at the time. He'd been roommates with Jeff Tankersley. And I believe Jeff was the guy who promoted that first reunion. And then, obviously, I was doing a bit of work with Gabe Sapolsky, and they wanted the first full Midnight Express reunion. In Philadelphia, the Midnight in the 80s, that was our town where we were the most popular with people, even when we were heels, because it was Philly. So they booked it there. So Dennis, I'd seen Dennis the week before, and so had Bobby. And we had talked on the phone before that. And so that's when the phone calls is when we found out everything that had been going on and what had happened originally. And by the time we got to Philly, Stan hadn't seen everybody, but he had seen me a few years previous to that and seen Bobby, hadn't seen Stan, or hadn't seen Dennis in all those years. But that
were they
was
cool with each other?
Yes. Remember, they were actually partners before Bobby and Dennis were in Georgia for about, 6 weeks?
In 80.
In 1980. But no, they were cool with each other. I mean, they were never close friends because Dennis was always a heel. Stan was mostly a babyface when they were together in territories. So they had never spent a lot of time with each other, but they were fine. And we did the reunion. It got over with people in Philly, and we did a Q&A that afternoon, which, as I've said, the fucking technical difficulties, it was never released. And I remember also we did a deal with Prince Nana and the Embassy, right? Where they were the heels to come in so that the Midnight could give somebody a few bumps and Bobby could do the rocket launcher, right? That's what people wanted to see. And we get Nana down and somebody had him, I think it was Bobby, had slammed him and grabbed his legs and split his legs like the old wishbone. And I got right in between his legs with the racket. And as I'm raising the racket up over my head like Paul Bunyan, I've got my eyes on his nuts. You should have seen Nana's face. He was looking up at me like, oh, God, no. I said, don't move, baby. I got you. And I whacked him with the racket in the nuts, never touched him. But the fucking people went crazy and he sold it like death. And we had a good time. Everybody got to see what they wanted to see. And then because of that, that's when, the first wave of reunion offers started coming through. And for 2005 and 6, I did a number of them, but Bobby and Dennis were wrestling a couple weekends a month by that point and had a nice little resurgence there until about, I think, 2009, 2010-ish. And at that point, Bobby's health got worse and he didn't need to be wrestling except, a little dab here and there. But they had a nice little run again at the end there and made more money per night on guarantees to do indies than we had made, years before in the territories.
Where do those reunions rank in terms of things that you did throughout your career that made you personally happy?
Several of them were a lot of fun. That thing in Philly, just because it was the first time and we didn't think we were ever going to all be together again, after all those years, that was fun. And some of them, were the rock and roll matches, the people still enjoyed, even though nobody was in the same shape that they were 20 years previously, the people still enjoyed just seeing the guys in the ring in person. And we'd run through, a few of the trademark spots and get a little heat and go, but no, we couldn't get any heat because they were all glad that we were all still breathing. So they were playing along with it. So it wasn't like the old days in that respect, but it was like the people were so respectful of seeing these guys, at that point that they had seen when they were kids, that they would boo us and cheer for the rock and roll because they knew that's what they were supposed to do, but they didn't want to see anything really bad happen to any of us like the first time around.